See, their whole tactic is not to try. They just put that doubt, and they let you go down the rabbit hole yourself, and they just give you the places to go. It's not that difficult to think that Ukraine, all of them are corrupt, all of them are fascists and Nazis, because there's enough propaganda out there, if you want to read it, to tell you that.
Hello. Our guest this week on The Edge is Ukrainian-born, U.S.-raised Lev Parnas, who many of you will recognize from his time working with Rudy Giuliani, trying to dig up dirt on the Biden family here in Ukraine. So he is uniquely qualified to talk about how Russian military intelligence stages their information warfare against the West. So, first and foremost, Lev Parnas, I just want to say to you how much we appreciate you taking the time and speaking to us. This is an incredibly important topic, and I'm eager to speak to you because, you know, as much as I have covered this part of the world, it is always a rare occurrence for me to be able to talk to somebody who actually had direct interaction with a Russian information warfare campaign that was aimed at the United States. I mean, that's what this was. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. We're going to this is going to make me be a little bit different than some of the interviews that you've done in the past, because, of course, we're coming from this perspective out of Ukraine. So I want to focus on not so much on what the Trump team was doing in America, although we'll discuss that. I really want to talk about what's been happening, Putin's efforts and this kind of, from a Ukrainian Russian, perspective. So we'll get into the cherry on the top of the cake when you talk about like your efforts in the run up to the 2020 election. But before we do that chronologically, I'd just like to start off with the big question in my mind, and I know where I stand on this, but I'd like to hear your input, especially with your expertise and experiences. Is there any doubt in your mind that in 2016, the Russian military intelligence, the GRU, the Kremlin, infiltrated our body politic and threw the chaos grenade that is Donald Trump into our election? In essence, swayed what was a very, very close election with Hillary Clinton. I mean, I put Trump squarely as a Russian asset because, to my mind, having studied these guys, I could see what was happening. Do you see the same thing that Trump was willingly, knowledgeably or not, installed by Russia?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, Philip. And I agree with you on almost everything you said, and I just want to, push back a little bit because it's important for the truth to come out, because a lot of people say a lot of things about Donald Trump. And what I try to make sure is that we don't allow him to fight these, because there's a lot of also conspiracies about Donald Trump, and we don't need to throw any extra conspiracies when there's enough facts and truth about actually what he did. So when we talk about him being an asset, he was never an asset where you're talking about, like, say, somebody that went over there and was, trained and, or over here was like, fed information over years and was working with the GRU or the Kremlin, and then eventually built himself up to become the president. And now he's a GRU asset working for, the government. That never happened. So let's make sure we understand that. But was he an asset? Absolutely. He was an asset. He was I call him an unwilling fool. Somebody that basically, you got to understand Donald Trump, who Donald Trump is, and then you'll understand why he's such a perfect asset for the Kremlin, for China, for, even with a strong stance against Iran, he's even an asset for them, because what he does, he has the mind of a dictator. He grew up with an authoritarian father and an authoritarian family. He grew up in also in a time in New York, you have to understand, where mobsters controlled all of the, the mafia controlled all the construction, all the unions. And that's who Donald Trump dealt with, because that's who he was. He was a builder. He also then went over into the casino industry. Again, he had to deal with the mob. So his whole life, he grew up in an atmosphere where it's like wanting to be that guy where I say goes, not have anybody doubt him, not have anybody second guess him, but what I say goes. And that's the mentality Donald Trump has, and that's the same mentality dictators have and authoritarians have. But the other thing Donald Trump has that is even worse is his narcissism. His narcissism is to such a degree where it's taking him to become a monster, and it's grown over time, obviously. So yes, Donald Trump admires Vladimir Putin very much. He doesn't know Vladimir Putin,
and it's not easy to manipulate. It's not that hard to manipulate a guy like that if you know his insecurities and all the rest of it. Which I'm sure the GRU did.
And so
you just pull the strings.
You pull the strings. You put a press release out. You invite him to a party. You send in somebody. Yes. So absolutely, was he groomed? 100%. You know what I'm saying to you?
Yeah.
Even to the fact that you have to remember in the 90s and the 2000s, when all of a sudden the Russians, when the wall broke down, where did they pour all their money into real estate? It was all into Trump properties. You know what I'm saying?
Well, this is the This is the thing. This is the thing.
It's like, you could say it's coincidence. You could say, oh, okay, he had the high-end properties. Yeah, it all looked great, but these people weren't coming in and buying one apartment at a time. These people were coming in and basically cleaning their money by buying 50, 30 apartments, $1 million apartments at a time.
Yeah.
And so when you do that, you become close with the developer. And so Trump over the years has built relationships with some of these, you could say, very close associates of Vladimir Putin. So was he ever close? He doesn't have a relationship with Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin thinks he's a joke, but Vladimir Putin loves him because he's so useful to him and what he's doing. Because just think about it. Vladimir Putin, his dream is to dismantle NATO. And here he has a guy coming up there, the president of the United States, where he didn't have to ask him. He didn't have to call him and bribe him. He didn't have to offer him something for it. He didn't even expect it. The guy himself comes out and says, I'm going to dismantle NATO, and I'm going to tell Vladimir Putin, do whatever you want to do. I mean, just think about it. But the reason Trump does that, see, you have to understand his mentality. Trump understands, because when you deal with gangsters, it's all about messaging. It's all about cryptonic messages. So he's not going to pick up the phone and call Vladimir Putin and say, hey, I'm going to do this for you, and I want you to help me with my elections and make sure that I'm do whatever it takes, your bots, your AI, whatever it takes, go bomb Ukraine, get Iran to get involved, make the world a mess so I get into office. How does he do that? He can't pick up the phone and call him because it's all recorded. There's everything, So he goes on live TV for no reason. Nobody, NATO was not even in the news, and comes out and just says, you know what? NATO sucks. I told them they suck. I told them they're going to pay me more. You know what? And if they don't, I told Vladimir Putin should do whatever he wants. Out of the blue. People didn't understand what was going on. But a week later, what happened? We had the death of Navalny. So, I mean, all of these things, all of these cryptic messages. So, yes, is Trump an asset? He's a tremendous asset for Russia, for all of these, not only authoritarian countries, but also for the criminal world. All of these oligarchs all over the world. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Phil.
I have said this for years. I saw the rise of Vladimir Putin. I was a Moscow correspondent in the late '90s, and I saw the end of the Yeltsin era and the rise of Putin. And I have said for many, many years, and you can speak to this because you grew up partly in Little Odessa, this Brighton Beach kind of section for Ukrainians.
Not only that, but from '89 to '93, during the whole fall of the war, I was in Russia. I was doing international trade there. I've actually met Putin, not met him personally, but met him when he was the mayor at the time. He wasn't even, he was the mayor of Leningrad at the time.
Petersburg. He was the bag man for, what's his, I'm gapping on the mayor's name, but Sobchak. Anyhow, but I've said for years that we thought at the end of the Cold War that it would be our system that would go east. We won the Cold War after all, right? But what I think actually happened was we took down the Iron Curtain, and the corruption of the Soviet Union and the Russian system flooded west. We didn't go east with our culture, with democracy, the rule of law, and capitalism. Their crony capitalism and their kind of gangsterism came west. You see it in New York, all over the place. You see it in London, Paris.
It's all over the world. But absolutely, and when we say we won, we didn't really win. What happens is, it's like in a fight. We beat the guy up. He was laying on the ground, and it was a fight to the death, because whoever wins is going to kill the other guy. And then all of a sudden we had pity on him, like we always do, because we have empathy, we have humanity, and because we want to feel that the other side is going to do right, and we let him live. And and they took that advantage, and like you said, absolutely, they understood that they needed to, because the number one thing to be able to be powerful is you need to have financing. And what Vladimir Putin did creatively is he took his oligarchs and made that his army. He loaded them up with money and spread them all over the world to invest that money into critical different parts of real estate, different parts of energy, and do all of that when they were all basically using his money under the pretenses that they were building a democracy. They let go all of their criminals all over the world, allowing them free haven back in Russia if they were to get in trouble. Just look at back in the history. And that over time, absolutely. They, instead of us, yes, did we infiltrate democracy in Russia? Absolutely. There's lots of people there that hate Vladimir Putin, that understand what it is, but we didn't do enough. And no. we allowed him to take 20 years basically to regain himself, get stronger, build up his money. And his only underestimation was that his biggest underestimation was, besides all the bad information he was getting from his Russian counterparts in the Ukrainian government, like Medvedchuk and those guys, but the biggest problem was he underestimated that Joe Biden was going to be able to get NATO back together, unite everybody, and come out and help Ukraine at the most critical time such strong. He never thought that was going to happen. When Trump left office, the way NATO was dismantled, and then January 6th in the United States. See, people say, oh, yeah, he invaded under Biden, but it took him time to invade. He had to watch. He looked at the chaos. He understood that the United States was going through their own insurrection. They're not going to worry about, he thought, about any other country right now. So plus NATO's in disarray, and without the United States coming out as a leader, they're not going to start funding Ukraine and just throwing money down the drain. So for him, that's why he made those statements. I'm going to come into Kyiv and take it over in 2-3 days.
Yeah,
but that was
massively
his big
underestimate.
A massive,
huge underestimation.
But the biggest underestimation was the will of the Ukrainian people. That was the biggest.
Yeah, no, I see it here every day.
He thought he was going to come in there, and they were going to. He was being told by Medvedchuk and others that he's going to come in there, and they're going to accept him with, parades, and they're going to want to. I mean, instead they kicked his ass and told him to get the hell out of here.
Yeah, they sure did. The second he didn't decapitate the government here and take Odessa, the war was lost. But it's interesting you talk about this, because you have this understanding. You being an American citizen, your family moved there when you were 3. So you have a leg in both cultures, and you understand the corruption that I'm sure saw when you were living in Russia, and then obviously what happened here in Ukraine. I first came to Ukraine in 2001, so I've seen a lot of different phases. So let me talk a little bit about as we approach the discussion of what you and Giuliani were doing here in the run-up to 2020. There's this whole period of time that I think our American audience needs to understand, where I equate it to the classic film Casablanca, where you're in this very weird place where you have all these factions, and they're all operating in the same city, but they're at odds with one another. So you've got, I mean, they didn't even close.
That's
they didn't
such
even
a great
close
example,
down.
Philip.
It's Casablanca, man. It's totally Casablanca. With the free French on one side of Rick's bar. It's totally Casablanca. I remember coming here during this period of time, and always I would run into people and be like, "That dude is up to something. That guy is sketchy. These guys are running some scam.
It was
Those guys are running
Casablanca
some
on the
scam."
steroids. It was Casablanca on steroids.
And with car bombings and assassinations.
Oh my! Yes.
Explain to me the kind of environment that you were going into with this Ukraine as it was during this period, you're coming into a place with massive corruption and all of these machinations going on. What was Kiev like when you started coming here and kind of doing what it was in conjunction with the BLT guys? And we'll go into that in depth later. But I just want to set the scene. What was Kiev like when you were doing all this stuff?
Yeah. So you have to understand, Philip, I have a really good understanding about Eastern politics and Easter, because not only was I born there, and then I came here to the United States when I was 3 years old, and I moved into that little enclave of Brighton Beach. But I also, when I turned 18, I started traveling back, and I was involved, and I had a big import-export company during the craziest years, during 89, 90, 91, 92, 93. And then I built such massive relationships that over the years I've doing business in Ukraine and former, Russia, till actually I started getting involved in politics with Trump. And that's why I even was able to be such a use to Trump or be such a, problem to the world, is because of all these contacts and because of my knowledge. And one of the things that I understood very well, that, listen, corruption is all over the world. Where I was blinded is I thought we were not corrupt. I thought that the United States didn't have the level of corruption that I obviously understood that we were involved with. But at the time, because I was blinded, thinking that we were so honest and good, I understood that, listen, there's corruption in Ukraine. There's corruption in Russia. There's corruption in Poland. There's corruption all over the place. But for us, it's like a way of life. Like, we understand that, you go to the meat market, you give the butcher a little extra a couple of dollars, he gives you a better piece of meat. Nobody thinks about bribing, but in the United States, you don't do that. It's not like, you expect to go in there and the butcher to give you the best piece of meat, and you're going to stand and scream at him. So it's a different way of life. You know what I'm saying to you? But
yeah,
so I understood.
It's like the air you breathe or the water you swim in.
Correct. So I understood navigating. It's going to be very difficult, because it's very difficult. I can't say there's anybody that's not completely honest, because you have to live in that world. You have to be able to maneuver with every single side. So everybody has skeletons. But there are more people that want to push towards democracy and end it, and there's others that want to keep corrupting it, and that's how I differentiate it. So that's why it's very difficult to say, oh, this guy is pure and this guy, because then you're getting into where, as soon as they start getting Oppo information, oh, and everybody's corrupt, everybody's there. So I break it down into people, that the good and the evil. So when I came down there, I was so blinded by the information that I was getting from the United States side, because remember, I was working with Trump, the president of the United States. My information was coming to me from the CIA, from the Secret Service, from the state. So the information that I was getting downloaded, how could I believe that it's wrong? So I was getting downloads say that the Ukrainians are corrupt, that they're trying to, because they're corrupt, not because of whatever they're doing. They're corrupt because of their relationship and their love for the DNC, and because of their friendship with the Clintons. And then you got to take in mind, then you take a look at the 2016 election. What happens? All the Ukrainian, from Avakov, Poroshenko, everybody was for Clinton, even the Ukrainian ambassador. So Trump, with all of that, you implement and you understand, you think, okay, so the current administration is no good. But where is it no good? And this is where our idea came from, is say, listen, you can't stop the full corruption of anybody in Ukraine, but how we could manage it is by the U.S. ambassador. Because what a lot of Americans didn't understand is that the ambassador plays a very key role in countries like that, because of the respect, because of the way even the people there manipulate between themselves, without even the ambassador knowing, because of the relationships they have with the ambassador. It's a very, spy, counter spy type of game, because you're dealing with big money, power. So our idea was, Soros, what we were told first, that Soros and the Democrats implanted all of these ambassadors all over Eastern Europe to to control, and this is the ambassadors are now, and then we get guys like Yuri Lutsenko coming on board saying that all of a sudden the ambassador is telling him, don't prosecute this guy, don't do this guy. So everything starts coming together. So we're saying, so to me, my job was, I'm coming into a very crazy territories, very dangerous territories, because I'm just talking about on the outskirts of the political side, but all of these players, you have to understand, are involved with all of these oligarchs. They're involved with all kinds of criminality. Because I came in there in 2000, when we first came in, it was 2018. This was before the election. Poroshenko was still president. So we came right into the mix when Poroshenko, Timoshenko, all of them were trying to regain power again. It was such a crazy environment until all of a sudden Zelensky came out of nowhere. Nobody expected him.
Yeah.
He was put in there. He was put in there by what's his name, Kolomoisky, to take away votes from Poroshenko.
Ukrainian oligarch.
Right. Because it was all about, they thought Timoshenko would. So there was so much to this backstory that there was so much like you say, Casablanca. I'm talking about, I mean, you got to imagine, I'd be walking into Minister Avakov's office, having a conversation with him where he would lock the windows, he would put on this device that goes shh, and we'd have this conversation. And then after I would leave, then he would get in his car with his entourage and drive over to the U.S. Embassy, meet with the U.S. ambassador and download him on what we were talking about, then call me afterwards and tell me about his meeting at the U.S. Embassy. Are you fucking kidding me?
This is exactly what I'm talking about. The machinations, the double dealing, the scheming. It was everywhere here in Kiev during that period.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
But the Americans are just as bad. I mean, it's not that the Ukraine was it was just the way that system.
No, it's just the environment is different. And there's the legacy of the Soviet Union. Yeah, there's a legacy of the Soviet Union and Russia.
Of course. I mean, you understand your politics over there. I mean, you have so much infiltration inside your own politics that's why it hurts Ukraine so much, because of the funding you get from Russia, like with the pro-Western parties and whatever that we're trying to, infiltrate. So, I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's not about corruption. It's about good against evil. You know what I'm saying? All countries have their different ways of life. You know, if the people that live there are okay with, the police officer letting you go and maybe giving an extra $20, and they're okay with that, and everybody loves it, who are we to tell them how to live? Like, I'm saying that's not the corruption. I'm talking about corruption on the highest levels that control the freedom, the liberty, of people.
Well, and one of the things I think Putin has actually done, and I don't know how long it's going to last, but while corruption hasn't completely been the fracturing of Ukrainian society and like the pursuit of different oligarchs against different oligarchs, that has been tampered down during the war because there is this common enemy in Russia.
Philip,
but it's still a massive problem.
Yeah, and I'm going to just stop you right there. Like, for people to think that it's going to end, it's not. Like, the mafia, American mafia, is never going to disappear. The oligarchs are not. Yes, you might arrest Kolomoisky today, and you might throw Firtash out into Australia. You might go, get rid of Medvedchuk and all of this, and yes, and it'll be quiet. But right now, as we speak, I promise you, there is a new breed of those same guys that are being bred and are taking over. They're going to start popping up younger, and it's just a way of life. So, I mean, people have to stop just worrying about, because that won't change your life. What will change your life is who's running your country and the decisions he's going to make and the cabinet he puts in together. I mean, the other things, it's like, like I said.
Yeah. And look, along with this kind of corruption that, is so endemic here, you get sent over because you understand this and you understand the lay of the land here. And so, Giuliani sends you over here to, work on in this corrupt system for the advantage of the Trump administration. Also, as you say, with this idea that the DNC and Soros and the deep state and all this stuff are doing all this. So you're genuinely thinking that you're trying to help not only Ukraine, but also America. You're trying to do something.
Oh, absolutely. Remember,
good here. I've read your book, and you describe it very clearly.
Absolutely. I mean, if
you thought you were doing something good.
Oh, absolutely. If you even remember my tape conversation that was leaked between Trump and when I was telling him about when that whole infamous, get rid of the ambassador tape. But there was a lot more in that conversation that, people have to understand, where I was really explaining to Trump how important it was for him to stand up for Ukraine against Russian aggression. Also, at the time, part of what we were doing was trying to cut off Ukraine's dependency on natural gas from Russia by having more liquid. So the LNG. So we were always, my whole objective was to try to bring Trump and Ukraine together, thinking that once Trump loves Ukraine, Russia's over with. That's it. It's done. But the problem was, there was forces internally in Ukraine and Russia that were also fighting against it. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And my
Yes.
whole intention was when I came to Ukraine was not to try to figure out who's corrupt or not who's corrupt. My whole intention, and that's why I met with Poroshenko, I met with Zelensky's, I met with Timoshenko, I met with all of them, and I told each and every one of them the same thing: is like, you have an opportunity right now to have a great relationship with the United States. My whole goal was to make a marriage between Trump and them, because I understood that if Trump, I knew who Trump was, that if Trump starts standing behind the Ukraine, that he will be, that Russia, it's his relationship with Russia will start tampering. Do you understand? But there was just too much
And
big forces.
yeah, and
Yeah,
as
go
you
ahead.
describe it in your book, which is a great read, by the way, and folks should get a copy of Lev's book, Shadow Diplomacy. And you know, there's a lot of meat on the bone there, so we'll talk in broad strokes. But you come over here thinking you're doing something good, both for America and for Ukraine, both of your
Absolutely.
countries. But you know,
Absolutely.
and you distinctly try and stay away from what you think are Russian agents. You're really focused on corruption. You're focused on trying to get out what you think is these lefty Soros, DNC, bad actors in Ukraine. But did you ever at the time, and I recognize that during the time you were kind of like in the Trump spell, but did you
Oh, I
ever
was
at
in the
any
cult.
point, yeah, you were in the cult. Did you ever since then, or do you looking back on it now, because you were focused on corruption, you were focused on Ukraine and doing something good for Ukraine, but looking back on it now, do you ever think that maybe some strings were being pulled out of, out of Moscow with your efforts? Because we'll talk about
Oh,
Giuliani's in a
100%.
moment,
Oh,
because you diverge.
well, 100%. But let me put it this way: did they try? Absolutely. But what I was blessed because I had so many relationships over the years, and because my partner Igor also had such good relationships, we were able to, how do you put it, listen to all the sides and find the middle. Do you understand what I mean? And we were able to
Yeah.
see, like, so we were able to see who those Russian, like, I knew who Dear Koch was. Like, I didn't have, because of even people that were on his own team that tried to get into good graces, sold them out. Do you understand what I mean? Because it's just the way of life there. Where they were manipulated, see, these guys got into a guy named John Solomon in the United States. John Solomon is a reporter for The Hill. He's very close friend of Donald Trump. And now he was a very close friend, Sean Hannity, Fox, Julian. He was part of the BLT team. What I didn't know then, that I know now, obviously, was the way they were using me was basically, so Solomon would come to me and say he has a source. He wouldn't disclose it. He would come to me, Giuliani, and Trump, like to our meeting, and say that he has sources that say, for instance, that there's a tape of Joe Biden accepting a $5 million bribe. And then he'd say, go to Ukraine and find that tape. It's out there. And we would go there, and all of a sudden, when we arrived there would people be coming out of the woodworks, telling us, leading us on different wild goose chases to get that tape. By giving us paperwork, showing us that it exists, transcripts of it, but never actually getting the actual tape or recording of it. So, and when I realized what was happening, actually, is now what I could tell you what was happening then. Back then, I didn't know it. I was on wild goose chases, but his sources was Dear Koch and Telezhenko. So Dear Koch and Telezhenko would give Solomon propaganda. But Solomon couldn't spread it in the United States because you needed more corroboration. The media wouldn't just pick up on his propaganda. So he sent me over there, and because of my relationships with people like Yuri Lutsenko, Poroshenko, Avakov, people that were that ran the country, and had me have them validate that, which they didn't. And this is where the string became, because they were so in their own positions to try to play the role of being on both sides for the Ukraine and also trying to help Trump get what done. So they would draw the line. So Yuri Lutsenko would constantly come out and say, yes, Hunter Biden did something wrong, and 2 minutes later he'd come out and say, but he did nothing wrong in Ukraine. You know what I mean? So and that's where and that's where you started getting it, where I couldn't understand how it was. But now I understand, obviously, that I was the tool that they used to actually get that information validate to the point where it broke through the mass media in America. Because they were trying to do this. Because you gotta understand, they were trying to do this since 2015, 2016. They were trying to get this Hunter Biden, Burisma stuff, and they just couldn't do it. Kulik has been coming over here, and they've been hiring lawyers, but they couldn't get the validation of the Poroshenkos, of the Lutsenkos, of the people in power.
And no actual evidence, no recording,
correct, right, correct.
Even the hard drive is highly suspect. The laptop from hell. Yeah. Well, this is how they do it. This is how they do it. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No. So it was go ahead. Yeah. It was an ingenious plan, and it was orchestrated obviously by the Russians, which were pulling the strings, which Derkach was leading there. So what you said was 100% right. The strings were being pulled.
They were fixated in particular on Maria Yanukovych, the U.S. ambassador, Ivanovich. Sorry, I misspoke.
That's okay.
They're very much fixated on her. And then ultimately, you and this BLT group, which, by the way, we should clarify for those who don't know, is this BLT group is kind of this organization this grouping of guys that had a common cause in trying to aid Trump.
It was basically Trump's inner team. It was Trump's when Trump used to go on those rallies and say, "People say" or "People tell me," we were those people. It was our team. It was made up of me, Rudy Giuliani, John Solomon, the reporter I was telling you, and 2 other Trump lawyers, Victoria Tunzing and Joe DeGenova. That was a core of the team, and then obviously we had every congressman, senator, at our will and call, Fox News and stuff. But we were the core that generated all the media that you saw, all the news that came out, all the decision making that happened, everything that transpired from like 2017, 18 till 2020 was run by the BLT team. We are those people that Trump was talking about.
Conducting, in essence, a Russian information warfare attack on the United States. Yeah, ultimately, that's what it was. Yeah, and again, they were fixated on Ambassador Yovanovitch. Talk a little bit about what that was like. Like this, you were pursuing getting rid of her. That was a huge part. Was it because you thought that the Ukrainians and the corrupt Ukrainians that she was trying to crack down on, that they definitely wanted to get rid of her? Was that the primary quid pro quo, do you think? It was getting rid of her in exchange for... Yeah, go ahead.
The very first quid pro was to get for Poroshenko. When I had the 3-hour meeting with Poroshenko, was for Poroshenko before Zelensky was even on the map, is for Poroshenko to come out and announce an investigation into the Bidens and talk badly about Maria Ivanovich, and then Trump would, obviously support him during the race. That was the first quid pro quo, which Poroshenko turned him down. But you have to understand what we realized. One of the things I realized when I came to Ukraine and when I started dealing with Lutsenko and Poroshenko and all of them, I realized that they were scared of the U.S. ambassador. It didn't matter who the U.S. ambassador was. I saw the way the system was in place, that the U.S. ambassador was their connection to the White House. The U.S. ambassador was their basically, it's like the U.S. ambassador was like a mini president inside and had a lot of power. So if the U.S. ambassador was corrupt, he could be doing whatever he wants. And if the U.S. ambassador was straight, he could do. So I understood that the U.S. ambassador weighed a lot of power. Now, at that point, I was being told that the U.S. ambassador was corrupt, that she was corrupt for the Clintons, the Bidens, the Obamas, that she was there to run, working for George Soros, and that she was corrupt, but she was corrupt for the bad guys. And she would go after the good guys and let this, bad guys do whatever they want. So that's where we had the plan, where I came up with the plans. We get rid of her and we implement a Trump loyalist, somebody that will do what we tell him to do. Not to be corrupt, but to be, to, go after the corruption, to go after that's gonna, come in there and clean up. And that's why even the person that was supposed to be the U.S. was Pete Sessions, Congressman Pete Sessions from Texas. He was going to be the guy that was going to come in and do that. He's the one that wrote the letter to Pompeo about getting rid of her and stuff like that. So, it was the plan. We weren't going to go in. We understood that, I at least understood that you're not going to go clean corruption out by trying to put one guy in instead of another, because as soon as he gets the presidency, that system is very corrupt. Payments flow from different places, and he's either you gotta be an angel and turn away and say no, because it doesn't matter if you're the president, if you're the attorney general, or if you're taxation minister, Roman Nasirov, if you remember that guy. It doesn't matter what position. Each position in all of those places have inbuilt money that comes them under the table for services they provide. And then, the good guys basically just take what it is and keep the system going and move forward. The bad guys want to exploit it and take it to a different level, and that's the difference. But the system's been in place forever, and you're not going to change it. You're not going to come in and get rid of everybody and everything in place. It just doesn't happen. Over time, maybe, absolutely, but it just doesn't happen. So I understood that. So what I understood is that if we put in the U.S. ambassador that is not corrupt, but loyal to America, that it doesn't matter who's the president of Ukraine. It doesn't matter who, because they're going to be on their knees in front of the ambassador, because, she
and
could just cut off.
And of course, at this time, you're thinking that, that Ambassador Yovanovitch is corrupt in terms of being DNC and Soros. You're trying to get Pete Sessions in here, who you don't think is corrupt, but of course now in retrospect, obviously totally corrupt. It's this thing that the Russians do, and it's so hard for me to explain to an American audience, and that's why I love talking to guys like you who get this. What Russia does in some ways, and it's crucial to their efforts, is you look at the same fact, but it's like that dress of meme a few years ago, or whatever it was, where you look at it and they see it's gray, some look at it and see it's blue. You're looking at the same dress.
Cup half empty.
It's a matter of perspective, and they're very, very good. They're very, very good at manipulating Westerners who aren't acclimatized to this kind of mind fuckery. Yeah, so
because it's easy for them, because we're naive, because they live in that world.
Yeah, we don't understand.
We think that it's crazy. The regular American, if you tell them the word bribe, they'll think, oh my, like are you what's it called? So they understand, and they know how to hit those points and say, but what if? See, their whole tactic is not to try. They just put that doubt, and they let you go down the rabbit hole yourself, and they just give you the places to go. They just point you. That's the way. There's like, but just think about it for a second. What if you're telling me that Ukraine's not corrupt, and then you start thinking, well, they do have corruption. And you start looking Ukraine corruption. Next thing you know, and you go down that rabbit hole. And I promise you, it's not that difficult to think that Ukraine, all of them are corrupt, all of them are fascists and Nazis, because there's enough propaganda out there, if you want to read it, to tell you that. Especially with social media and the internet nowadays, and
the ambassador isn't really pursuing the State Department's interests, or Vice President Biden isn't actually doing something that basically the entire international community wants, which is to get rid of Prosecutor Shokin. But you can turn that into, oh no, he's doing it to protect his son Hunter, and it's
very easy. I mean, look,
manipulating your perception of reality.
It's one thing. They're masters of manipulating perception of reality, but Hunter Biden and gave him a gift of all gifts. I'm not blaming Hunter. He was used, he was abused, he had his own problems. There was a lot, but what I'm saying to you is they couldn't even believe that they had that. Do you understand? So that's why they were going crazy for so many years, how they couldn't use it to exploit that. Until this, do you understand what I'm saying? So yeah, because you have to understand, for an American, the perception of what Hunter Biden did is so bad, and that's why we see what we see. That's why we have impeachments going on without any evidence, because the perception is so bad that it looks like, well, if there was smoke, there had to be fire. No, they didn't have to be fired. There could have been a smoke machine. There could have been a guy
Yeah.
sitting there blowing, and then so it's perception. It doesn't mean it's like magic.
Yeah.
Just because I ripped it doesn't mean that's how it happened. There's an explanation, if you want, and that's the problem. And they're the masters of using that. I mean, just think about what they did in 2016. They had a whole city of troll farms set up to be able to use the internet and everything to interfere in our elections. Just think about what they're going to do this year with now AI technology. We haven't even gotten there, Philip. I mean,
yeah, no, I mean, we also know that they were able back in 2016 to do things like micro-target people because they were getting Oppo research from Paul Manafort. So
and
all of this,
thing.
I mean, it's
and just think about it. Paul Manafort is back in the Trump campaign,
and he's on the floor of the Republic. He's on the floor of the Republican convention, walking around a free man. The man is a criminal traitor to his nation, in my opinion. Anyhow, but so look, there's this other aspect to what you're talking about here, with what they wanted to believe. The guys like Giuliani, or the guys that the guys that were convinced that there was this nefarious Biden, Soros, Clinton stuff going on here. What I found so interesting in your book is that they are repeatedly told no. No, there was no corruption. No, Hunter Biden didn't do anything wrong. He was, in essence, a loan guarantor, because Moscow's oligarchs would rob this place blind, and then when they get almost caught, they piss off back to Russia. A guy with the name Biden can't just disappear, so he's a loan guarantor in no small part, and they keep getting told he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't do anything wrong. And they just compartmentalize it, and they're like, no. Is it because they were so hell-bent on finding something on Biden that they could weaponize and use? Or do you think they did actually buy into the narrative of like Soros and Clinton?
It was a combination.
Was it self-fulfilling, or?
Well, it's a combination of all of those. I mean, you got to understand, these people truly believe the deep state. I mean, they truly believe Soros, Biden, because you have to understand, they're corrupt. So they think that the other side does the same thing they do. If we're going to do it, and to be all fair, the other side is also corrupt. I'm not here saying that only Republicans are corrupt and it's only Julie. I mean, there's a lot of bad guys on the other side and this side, right? But it's not about the left or the right now. It's about Donald Trump, because none of them are as bad as he is. Yes, I'm saying to you. Yeah. So it's the perception
of democracy or
or
autocracy. That's the choice.
Exactly.
I think we're looking at.
I mean, that's the choice we have right now, and so all of that is like. It's irrelevant. I mean, you have to concentrate on the individual, and also, a lot of things. Concentrate on what he's doing, what he's saying. Just think about what normal individual that had even like an ounce of thought of empathy towards what's going on in Ukraine would have Viktor Orban come to meet with them constantly in Mar-a-Lago. I mean, I see a lot of people in America don't realize it, because they're looking at Viktor Orban as a leader of another country, meaning another country. They don't understand Viktor Orban's a thug. He's Putin's guy. These guys met up, sat down, like me and you are talking right now. They sat down before, and Putin said, when you meet Trump, tell him this. Now, Viktor Orban didn't come and say, Putin said this. Viktor Orban is a master. He came in and explained to him, listen, I know Putin for so many long. I know, and if you do this, he'll think this, like that. And by the way, I spoke to him yesterday. He sends his hello. For Donald Trump, he peed his pants. That's it. Putin says hello. Yeah. So it's. I've been to so many of those meetings, and that's what I'm saying to you. And then you have him come back again. 2 weeks later. Why is Viktor Orban all of a sudden flying back and forth to Mar-a-Lago? I mean, you just realize it. I mean, they do it out in the open, and they don't even hide it, because then he comes out, and Viktor Orban comes out and says, Donald Trump told me he's going to stop all aid to Ukraine.
Yeah, look,
I mean,
we're running out of time here, so I
I'm
want to
sorry.
I want to make sure I
We
get
can
a
also.
couple of real.
I was going to say, Philip, just because I think it's important for your audience. I think we have lots of that. If you want, we could do a part two. I could come by, so whatever we don't finish, so you don't have to rush.
I would love to.
So instead of you
That's
rushing,
great.
I
would love
okay,
to do that, Lev, and maybe as we get, you've got a documentary a series
Yes,
or a
absolutely.
documentary coming out in September.
Yeah,
maybe a little bit closer to that. We can pick up some other important
absolutely.
topics and really dig underneath and see where the termites are. But while I've got you now, let me try and wrap this up because you've got a heart out here. I'm just going to go with a couple of quick questions. And it's the one question I need to ask you is Giuliani, at one point, you're busy doing your efforts with the various guys in the Kiev government. You're importantly trying to get them to start a Biden investigation. And there's the Yovanovitch issue that you're trying to do on their behalf. At some point, Giuliani diverts and he starts hanging out with guys that you are convinced are clearly Russian agents, that they are pursuing Russia's interests, and they're the ones that are now starting to inform Giuliani and his mindset. Do you think he knew that he was directly talking with Russian agents who were pursuing Russian interests?
Oh, 100%.
So he knew and he didn't care.
No, 100. He didn't care because the way Giuliani looked at it is like it didn't matter. It's like he would tell me I dealt with the mobsters. Like I don't care who they are as long as I could get from them what I need. You kind of, do you understand what I'm saying? He didn't care that he got a mobster to rat on another mobster. He didn't care that he was like that mobster, but if that mobster gave him enough information, so that's how he looked at it. He didn't care. He would look at, I don't care if he's Russian, Japanese. He's giving me information on the Bidens. That's good enough for me. You know what I'm saying to you? I don't care if he's KGB. I don't care, and it's crazy to think about, but that's the way he, so he knew. So start off with that. Not only did he know because I told him, but you also have to understand that before I got arrested, they were trying to infiltrate him. They did not infiltrate him yet because while I was there, I still, as bad as we were doing it, I still was buffering it. Until I got arrested, because at that point Telezhenko was trying to meet up with Rudy, but I would keep cutting it off. I would tell Rudy, don't meet him. Then Derkach tried to come meet with him. I would say, no, Derkach is a KGB agent. Kulik I cut off because when Kulik started going all radical. So I started understanding. Giuliani, have text messages where I'm telling him, he would tell me, this guy wants me. I'd say, remember, this is who he is. Oh, okay. So he knew. But when I got arrested, even Giuliani in his own interview came out and said, he goes, when I lost Lev, when he got arrested, I had no one to turn to. So he basically, that's when he opened the floodgates and then he started dealing with them directly. And the only people that went out to him, because Lutsenko, everybody that we were dealing with walked away because they had enough of Giuliani.
And I don't think it's just Giuliani. I think there are fellow travelers.
Not just Giuliani. Ron Johnson,
within the MAGA
Senator
movement,
Ron Johnson.
there's all over the place.
I could name you a bunch of them.
And by the way, thank you so much for your testimony in front of the House, in the House committee. I really appreciate it. As somebody who cares about this place and cares about what's happening with Russia's infiltration in America, it was a wonderful moment, especially you being able to turn directly to Peter Sessions and say, man, I knew what you did. You were working for the Russian intelligence, military intelligence agency involved in a military intelligence attack on the United States. That was a beautiful moment, and I appreciate you for doing it.
Philip. Thank you.
So, look, the last thing I just want to quickly say is you've got a thing here in your book where you say that if Trump gets in, we're looking at turning, if you go to Russia, you say, I've been to Russia many times. I'm paraphrasing here because for time, if you go outside of Moscow, if you go to where the oppressed people of Russia are, that's what Putin did to Russia. Trump wants to do the same. What would a Russian oligarchy look like in America? And let's wrap it up with a warning for Americans who might be watching.
I mean, Russian oligarch in America would be Trump's inner circle. I mean, he would, and that's why there's a Project 2025 here. I'm not going to go into it because it's a long conversation to go into. But what Project 2025 is basically taking this country back 100 years. What Trump wants to do, he wants to take away women's rights. He wants to take away, immigration. He wants to make America first, meaning stop interfering and getting involved and cut off trade with China and other countries, start only building internally. But if you take a look at what all of that is, that's the Soviet Union. That was one when they were during the Cold War. And what happens, only a certain part, only the people that are in the circle that are loyal to the party until they're not, and then they go to jail or get arrested or get killed. But till they are, they reap the rewards. But that's like 10% of the country. But the other 90% lives outside the means, live in rural areas where they don't have the same availabilities or the same. And that's how America was. That's how a lot of countries were. And that's why we're such a great country now. And that's why Putin is so angry what's going on in Ukraine, because what Ukraine did in the past 10, 15 years of becoming a democracy and just outgrowing. I mean, just think about how Putin used to look at Ukraine, where you would have construction going up, you would have, restaurants, economy growing, tourism growing, moving towards most of westernization. Meanwhile, people in Russia were getting oppressed. They were looking like they didn't have this. Yeah, there were certain people that did have it, the majority didn't. And that's what Trump wants to bring back. That's what his whole America First policy is basically take America back 100 years and mirror what you have in Russia. Your loyalty, your loyal circle is going to get everything, but you don't have to account to anybody. You don't have to ask anybody. You do what you want. You're the dictator. And the other 90%, they have no choice. You rule with the iron.
Well, we have to stop that. We have to resist. We have to resist Russian attacks. They are attacks. It's not just milquetoast lobbying. We are under attack from Moscow, and we need to be aware of it. So I appreciate you bringing the spotlight constantly to it. People read Lev's book, Shadow Diplomacy. We'll maybe touch base with you in the run up to this documentary you've made with Rachel Maddow's production team. Lev Parnas, thank you for coming and speaking to us on The Edge. Keep fighting the good fight. We appreciate you. We'll do what we can from Kiev, but the same battle is all around the world, and we have to push back against Russia, not least of which in Ukraine, but also in America. Thanks again for speaking to us.
Thank you, Philip, for having me. And absolutely, the fight has just begun, and we will win. And Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.